You're listening to the Public Affairs Show of your favorite local iHeartRadio station in Seattle. I'm Lee Callahan, and now we're going to talk about something real important that you can help out with, restocking our blood supply. Donating is fun. You get cookies, and you feel really good about yourself afterwards. Curt Bailey is the CEO and president of Bloodworks Northwest. Good morning, Curt.
Good morning, Lee. Wonderful to be back with you.
Thank you. It's great to have you on. So here's my question. We were in a code red at the end of 2022. How's it going now? And maybe first tell us what a code red is.
Well, a code red is an alert that we send out rarely, but on occasion, to the community that not only are blood stocks low, but the number of appointments and donations is low also. So those stocks are only going to get worse.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to forestall is getting to the point where we don't have an adequate amount of blood for the patients in the community. And so to avoid it ever getting to that terrible place, we issue a code red, which is an alert to say, okay, it's a serious situation. Come on out and donate. And if you haven't donated before, come do it for the first time. And let's get our blood stocks back to where our patients need them to be.
What's cool is that Western Washington responds. They're on it. You've got people that come in when they hear about this code red. Am I right?
It's absolutely true. What's really remarkable about our communities, and our communities, of course, are our friends and our neighbors and our colleagues and all these people that live in the Pacific Northwest, is they care. Yeah. And they care deeply about one another, and they care deeply about ensuring that patients can get the blood they need. And surely part of it is because, a lot of us are going to need a blood transfusion someday. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so when we issue the code red, the response is very fast. And increasingly what we see, which is really, really a beautiful thing, is it isn't just people who want to make their donation right now. The code red's issued, I want to go make a difference right now. It's also people who say, I bet they're going to need blood for a little while to come. Mm-hmm. I'm going to make an appointment for 2 weeks from now. And that is just as valuable. And so we also see in these code reds folks delaying the gratification of donating, making their appointment for a couple of 3 weeks out. And that helps protect the blood supply from dipping down again after a code red.
Right.
Because too many people want to give right away, and not enough people are willing to wait a few weeks.
Yeah. I've got Curt Bailey on the phone. He is the president and CEO of Bloodworks Northwest. They've got locations up and down the I-5 corridor for you to donate, set up an appointment and go into, and just go to bloodworksNW.org. Let's remind everybody what happens to a person, why they need a blood donation. What's the most common thing going on with someone when they need a blood donation in the hospital?
Well, the most common is cancer. And many cancer patients require a blood transfusion, in some cases to survive their treatment. And in fact, one of the reasons why cancer treatments can be performed is because the damage those treatments do to your blood, which is temporary, but nevertheless harmful, is corrected by the fact that you can get a transfusion right then and there. Wow. So we wouldn't be able to treat many patients for their cancer if we couldn't give them a blood transfusion. And, cancer is a disease of age. Lots of people get cancer, of course, at every age, but you tend to be more likely to have cancer as you age. And as life expectancies extend, as the population ages, with the baby boomer generation moving into those years, the incidence of cancer rises, and so the demand for blood for cancer treatments rises with it too.
Yeah.
And so so it's pretty likely that almost any listener knows somebody, whether they realize it or not, who's not all cancer, obviously trauma, bleeding trauma, car accidents, motorcycle accidents, and the like. But the other area, which is really amazing, is organ transplant.
Oh, yeah.
So here in the Pacific Northwest, we have major transplant centers, and livers, kidneys, lungs, hearts being transplanted into patients. And obviously, if they don't receive those transplants, they may have a very low survival. So the transplant gives them a new life.
Yeah.
But you can't do a transplant without blood.
Wow. These are just things that I didn't know. I mean, I simply did not know. I always thought it was about trauma and accidents and losing blood and that.
No, and if you don't mind, Lee, I'll just mention the fourth category.
Yes, please.
Cancer, trauma, transplant. The other is, over the last decade or more, we have seen across the country, and actually, as I understand it, across the developed world, an increase in postpartum hemorrhage.
Oh, no.
Which means moms deliver, and in the course of a delivery or subsequent to delivery, there is bleeding. And the incidence of very heavy, dangerous bleeding has gone way up.
Wow.
I'm not a physician by training, so I won't speak to the clinical aspects of it. All I can say is that we have this thing called a massive transfusion protocol, and it's kind of like hitting the fire alarm in the labor and delivery suite, where if there's very heavy bleeding during or after delivery, they'll call a massive transfusion protocol, and there's this well-established process and a great big basket of blood, different kinds of blood components, red cells and platelets and plasma and so on, will get rushed to the patient's bedside in order to make sure that patient doesn't lose too much blood. And the number of those massive transfusion protocols in the past year has just continued to climb. So really, unfortunately, one of the major reasons why people should donate blood is to save a mother's life.
Boy, this has been eye-opening and shocking, and I'm really glad we're talking about it because, I got my gallon pin a couple of years ago, and it was a huge...
All right.
I know. I just am so proud of it. So besides cookies, you can also get a pin, everybody. So get in there. Donate. Out of a current code red, are you feeling optimistic? Are other changes coming about that you feel that there'll be more and more donations?
Well, we need to keep the code red going a little bit longer.
Okay.
We would like to see really healthy appointment schedules, for the rest of January.
How many people do you need a day? How many people do you need a day to come through the doors?
Well, we'd like 1,000 people to be on our appointment schedules per day.
Cool.
And when that happens, we're usually in pretty good shape.
Okay.
And not everybody will be able to donate on the day. Sometimes someone's iron level might be a little low. Sometimes they maybe came back from a recent trip and didn't realize it was in an area with malaria and they won't be able to donate for 3 months, But those things should just be a temporary setback. Folks should make their appointment right away to come back. And so we account for the fact that some people get deferred. And, we get it that sometimes life happens and people can't show up for their appointment. And in those cases, we just ask, give us a call and reschedule as soon as you can. But 1,000 people per day on the appointment rolls, and we'll be in good shape.
So I interrupted, and I'm sorry, but I think you were going to talk about some reasons for optimism.
Well, the pandemic caused major turmoil in the blood supply for the entire United States.
Yeah.
And the Pacific Northwest adapted really well. And one of the things that we decided to do was we would really reduce our programs collecting blood at businesses and schools, in part because those were empty places anyway. And we created our pop-up donation center, pop-up blood drive concept, and instead started collecting blood in venues like T-Mobile Park or Providence or the Boeing Museum of Flight. And that was a great way to ensure an adequate blood supply, giving some convenience to members of the community to come donate in places if they chose not to come to one of our donor centers. But that could only last for so long. And now what we're in the middle of doing is bringing back our mobile blood drives and our mobile blood buses out into the community. And that takes a little time to ramp up. Yeah. And you might recall something called the Great Resignation. And we confronted that too, like a lot of healthcare. We had we lost a number of our colleagues who chose to go do other things with their lives, and we had to rehire. And Lee, we had to retrain, and it takes a long time to train somebody to draw blood.
Wow.
And we're still ramping back up. We're at the highest staffing we've been in a long time.
Good. But
we also have to make sure they're fully trained. And it's just it's a bit of a process to recover from a pandemic as it happens.
Yep.
So I'm optimistic about the trajectory, but we're going to have a bumpy year this year as we just bring back all the programs with all the staff that we used to have.
Yep. Those blood mobiles need staff. Now, you used to really score when you parked those things outside of Boeing. What do they call them? Boeing plants. Oh, my God. Is that right?
Boeing has been, we say Boeing. Of course, it's Boeing employees and it's Boeing employee family members.
Yeah.
And I can't prove what I'm about to say.
Okay.
But I'm going to say it anyway because I think it's likely true. And even if it's not perfectly true, at least it signifies something really important. And here, I actually think the Boeing company is probably the largest single source of donations of blood in the history of the United States.
That's so cool.
And the reason is because they have been in it for so long. And they've been so committed to this idea of we take care of each other. And one way we take care of each other is we give blood. And Boeing's a big community all across the nation in their different factories. And so I actually think Boeing has been the largest single contributor of blood donation in the United States, which is pretty awesome.
It really is. And you have thrown down the gauntlet for other companies to get it together and compete with Boeing, Microsoft, all you big guys, Amazon. Get on it, Amazon. Jeez. That's great. I do appreciate the convenience of the blood mobiles coming around to offices. And so those two need more employees. Is that right?
We're not fully staffed yet, Lee. Okay. We're getting way closer. I was just looking at the stats this morning, and I love this trend of every month we've got more specialists able to collect blood. But we're not quite where we need to be. We lost a lot of people over the course of the pandemic, and so we're still hiring. But
it's a cool place to work, right?
We think so. Yeah. I mean, every day you get to interact with folks who are happy to be in the chair, and you know that what you're doing as a blood collection specialist is, part of a connection that saves somebody's life. Yeah. And that's a pretty special thing to be a part of.
Can you apply right at bloodworksnw.org?
Sure can.
Okay. Another thing, are you still especially short on type O positive and type O negative? Is that always the case?
It does tend to be the case, Lee, for the simple fact that type O can be transfused into almost all patients. And so you don't have to be type O to receive type O. You could be type A, or you could be type B or type AB. And because it's the only blood type, type O is the only blood type that can be used that way. That's why it's called the universal donor. We tend to find it gets used more often in situations where you don't have time to get a blood type on a patient.
Sure.
So this goes back to trauma. It takes some time to blood type a patient, and if somebody does have a severe bleeding trauma, they come into the emergency department, physicians will start transfusing that patient with type O blood right away because they don't want that patient to suffer the harm of excessive bleeding and not have a transfusion already in play. They'll switch them over to the patient type once the lab has done the typing, but that could be half an hour later. And in the meanwhile, the they'll continue to transfuse type O.
I totally get it.
So oftentimes type O gets used in trauma.
Yeah.
And that's why type O donors have that rare privilege of often being the donors that save the lives of trauma victims.
Hey, everybody, on the phone with me is the president and CEO at Bloodworks Northwest, Curt Bailey. You talked earlier about sometimes when you show up, maybe you're iron poor blood, or maybe I'm wondering, is there a good way to prepare for a blood donation the night or the week before? Like maybe have a steak or drink a bunch of water? Does that help at all?
Well, one should always try to hydrate in advance of donating blood. Because think about it. Part of the blood donation, an inherent part of blood donation is some liquid will leave your body.
Right.
So you want to make sure you've got lots of fluid, and then you want to make sure you drink a lot of fluid afterwards. And not only that, you'll feel a little bit better. I know that I donate a lot. And as you know, being a lifelong donor, you feel a little tired afterwards, and you'll feel less tired if you're well hydrated to start and if you maintain good hydration, afterwards. Beyond that, it's always good to make sure that you've got adequate iron, and there's lots of delicious foods that have iron. That takes more than a few days. That's a change in your diet if you don't get enough iron today. But the good news is there's lots of delicious foods that have iron, and one should, of course, have those for a healthy life anyway.
Yeah. So who can donate? What are the age requirements?
Well, the age limit, this is sort of funny, Lee. There's no age limit. You can donate as old as you're able. And it used to be that we assumed folks over 65 would not donate blood. Now, this goes back some years. But now, persons over 65 often donate blood. And in fact, that segment of our community is one of the largest sources of blood donors. And we have blood donors in their 80s.
Yeah, that's cool.
That just keep doing it. It's super cool.
Okay, what's the minimum?
So minimum with parental consent, 16.
Okay.
And as long as you've got parental consent, you can sign up. And we have programs where we come into the high schools. Sometimes we come into the high schools, and part of the blood drive is what we call the vein-to-vein science program, which helps educate kids about blood biology. And it's a terrific tool, blood, because the human body has so much of it, and it touches every tissue, or almost every tissue in the body. Yeah. It's a terrific way to teach biology. Yeah, so sometimes we come into high schools and we bring those programs with us.
Very great. All right, everybody, let's get on it and donate. Just go to bloodworksnw.org. Thank you so much to President and CEO Curt Bailey. We'll have you back on again. I appreciate all that you do and all your staff do. It's great stuff.
Well, thank you, Lee, for allowing me to talk a little bit about the life-saving work we do. But in the end, it's the community that saves lives. And it's a real privilege to be a part of it.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Curt. We'll talk to you again.
Okay.